Okay, you should have the title screen up right now.
Yep,
Okay.
I do anyway.
All right. I do like to do presentations in kind of an interactive fashion. This is a little different doing it online. I actually haven't done it this way before. But I do have multiple screens, although I seem to have lost one. Interesting. I was going to say everybody could text message me if they got a question, but I seem to have lost the chat screen when I shared my screen.
Well, Mark, I think what we could do is if you go through the program, and then we can take a 5-minute break or something, come back and ask you questions if that works for you.
Yeah, or the audio channel's open. We could do that as well.
All right, however you want to work it is fine with me.
Yeah, just it was a little unexpected to lose the chat screen. I had it all set up, and as soon as I shared the screen, that went away. So, okay, everybody's got the title screen, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I'll watch it.
Okay, as you can, as you probably have seen, there's my chat screen.
I sent you a message.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Okay, so I do have it where I can see the chat screen now. So you can either speak up voice or you can send me a chat message, and I'll see that on the screen as well. At any rate, as you can tell from a lot of the photos that I've submitted over the last couple of years, I do a lot of work with models. And it is a different set of skills than doing a lot of different other types of photography. And of course, one of the first questions would be, why work with models? You know, over the years, I've done a lot of scenics. I've got sunsets, I've got flowers, all of these different things. One of the things I found about working with the models is it's more of a challenge. It's something new to do, new skills to learn. Some of the things that come up is one thing that everything's in motion. You have to be better about setting up your camera, you know, because if you don't have your camera ready to go, you're going to miss that moment, you know, that may happen. It may be an expression. It may be, you know, somebody walked into the frame, whatever it is.
Maybe your daughter falling off a rock in 5-inch heels and landing in waist deep water, so you decide to take a picture before you help her.
Yeah, I don't think I have that picture in the presentation, but yes, she did fall in the water.
I'm not bitter.
The next thing is that you learn to do composition faster. It kind of has to become reflex rather than being able to think it all through, because you're under a little more pressure interacting with another person. And there's also learning to communicate with that person. You know, you have to be able to direct the model what you want her to do. The other thing about the final images is there's an emotional connection with them. You know, most of the time you have the sunset or something like that. You know, people will give you, that's nice, it's pretty, you know, same thing with flowers. But a lot of times it's the picture of a person, something that they can relate to, that you get the reaction where they go, wow, you know. And that can be almost any emotion. It could be something funny, it could be sad, it could be almost anything that you want to express, anything from being pretty to being a darker image. Now, when you're going to get started, you know, because like I said, there's more pressures on you when you're working with a person in front of you. You want to make sure there's some things that you do ahead of time. One thing is learn to use your camera because it can be a little awkward if you've got somebody standing in front of you and you're fooling with the menus and settings in your camera. So you want to make sure that you know how to do the focus, the aperture, shutter speed, and the flash. A lot of times you will be using flash unless you're working outside. Even then you might want the flash for fill. Typically, that's going to be an off-camera flash, especially in a studio. The on-camera flash will do horrible things. So you're usually going to want the light coming from a different direction other than your camera. And on each image, you know, even though you are under some time pressure, you want to take a little bit to make sure that you keep the quality of your image. You got to decide what the subject of your image is. You know, like the picture I've got up there right now. The primary subject is the model. The flowers are kind of secondary. They add a bit to the photo, but I don't have every tree in the background. I don't have the road, you know, things like this that were not part of the photo. So you want to make sure that you look around and imagine what the picture is going to look at and decide what belongs in it. You're also going to want to make decisions about the quality of light, the pose, you know, what's in your background, and if it all fits the story of the photo. You know, even a simple photo like this one, you know, there's, you know, it may not be a huge story, but there's always something that you're trying to show with the photo. You want to make sure you keep an eye on what that is. Then you want to keep in mind your standard composition rules. You know, fill the frame, leading lines, rule of thirds, nose room, head room, diagonal, depth of field, subject isolation, and framing. Anybody have questions on what those are? You're all familiar with it? Kind of imagining you are, you know, because you're usually employing these compositions.
I have a question for you, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I have been criticized with sometimes is filling the frame too much instead of leaving breathing room, and you put nose room and head room in there. Could you talk about how you balance those competing, I guess, concepts of leaving breathing room and filling the frame, please?
Well, one of the things I usually do is I'll leave myself just a little bit of a buffer around the subject anyways. Some compositions work if you're cutting into the model's head when you crop it, but a lot of times when I shoot it, I don't know for sure, so I'll usually leave a little bit of room. But one of the things to watch with your headroom, it's usually you're going to want a minimum of headroom unless something there is really part of the subject. But the primary reason for that composition rule is that you don't want to, you know, rifle sight the camera where you've got you center your focusing screen on the model's face. Because then
your model's going to be about here.
Yeah, they can't see you right now.
Oh.
She was doing motions with her hands, but
we're like,
yeah, we're right there. But what they see right now is this.
I could see her fine.
Oh, you can see her. Okay. All right.
I can see 5 people.
Okay. All right. Good. But the basic of it is if you point the focusing screen at the model's face, which is easy to do when you're under pressure, you're thinking hit the target. What will happen is you'll have a bunch over her head that is not part of the subject of the photo. You know, so that's kind of a matter of the subject isolation and filling the frame. You don't have a lot of distractions over her head. What's actually going to happen on a lot of shots is the center of your focusing frame is actually going to be somewhere from her chest down to her waistline. Which, with an inexperienced model, sometimes you'll get a funny look out of that. The remedy is to, after you shoot the frame, show it to her and show her what you were shooting.
Mark, I have a question.
Yeah.
What is nose room?
Okay, that's you've seen it under probably different terms before, but a lot of times, like the people doing the photo critiques have mentioned that you want a place in the photo for your subject to go. You usually wouldn't have the person facing the edge of the frame. They're usually facing into the picture. Otherwise, it kind of looks a little awkward. You start wondering what's outside the frame that they're looking at. You know, it kind of raises a question, which you might use as a tool sometime, but most of the time you kind of want to integrate the subject with the environment that you put them in.
I see. Thank you.
Any other on this topic? These are really standard composition rules that apply to most photos. It's just you want to be very well aware of them because, like I said, you are moving a lot faster when somebody's in front of you, and it can push the rules right out of your head.
And that photo's about 5 minutes before I fell. I'm not bitter.
Yes, that is the location where Jenny fell in the water. Okay, so then you also want to have a plan for your photo. For one thing, the model is usually going to ask you about what it is. So you want to decide what your story is. One of the first questions I got when I started working with models on my own, what do you want me to wear? How do you want my hair? What should my makeup look like? And, at that point, I was kind of like, I don't know, which kind of left it up to the model to create those things. Anything that you can plan ahead of time is less to go wrong during the shoot. So you want to think about your story, your wardrobe, the background, the props, the lighting. Sometimes there's logistics for a particular location. You may have to have a picnic lunch or water or, any assorted things to make sure you take care of everybody on the shoot.
Yeah, and while you're coordinating with the model on a look and like what supplies she needs and such, if I'm coordinating with a photographer and I ask, okay, what kind of makeup look are you going for? How should I do my hair? And they say, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, do I schedule my haircut? Do I curl my hair? Do I bring all the makeup I own and do it there? So it's really kind of, you want to take the pressure off the model, especially if you're the one planning the photo. Give your model as specific instructions as you can. Even if it's just like, I'm thinking, a white dress, then I know, okay, I'll pack a few white dresses and some makeup that would maybe go along like simpler lines. Whereas, if a photographer is like, okay, I need you to cut your hair a little bit, really dramatic makeup in like blues and purples, then I'm like, okay, that's a very specific thing. So I'll go along those lines. But like, you just kind of have to have at least a general guideline.
Okay, along these lines, you may, kind of be maybe getting a little intimidated by all of the things that start happening, which brings us to the next topic, the nervous photographer. I think everybody that's worked with models has been through this in the beginning. You just, you start thinking all of this is overwhelming. You start worrying about what the model will think, especially if you're looking at a professional model. Are you going to live up to their standards? What are they going to think? The main recommendation on that is to be brave and just think about your concept and ask for what you want. What'll end up happening when you're talking to the model is she's going to say yes or no, or she might ask more questions, but it doesn't hurt to ask, and start a conversation. You kind of have to jump off that ledge. Some of the ways to, get used to it, group shoots, can be a way, because a lot of times if you've got multiple photographers working with the model, it kind of gives you an opportunity to hang back, play with your camera, work on your composition and stuff. But there still comes a time when it's time to work on your own. You need to learn to direct, actually talk with the model and get the, the poses that you actually want or in the background you actually want. I used to do a bunch of group shoots, with various camera clubs, the Gardena Camera Club, API, things like this. And one of the things that I found is after a while, it wasn't enough of a challenge. I wanted to be able to upgrade things. And a lot of times there were more aggressive photographers that would take over and I'd miss the shot that I actually wanted. So there was a time to go out and work on my own. One of the ways to start is to, work with a friend. Sometimes if you describe the image you want to do, you'll find a friend that's, interested in helping you create it.
Kids.
Yeah, kids. But especially if they're interested in the concept, a lot of times they'll give you a lot of help in helping to create it. And that's one of the reasons you want to try and be able to show your concept. If you can find somebody else has a similar photo, or if you can do a sketch or present an idea, that kind of helps get the model interested in working with you and helping to create it, which is actually one of the major reasons that someone poses to begin with, is because they really kind of get a kick out of the idea and want to help with the creation. Now, some things that help when you're getting nervous, having examples of the image you want to create, like I said, have a posing guide. And the posing guide can be a lot of different things, you see in the picture there, that's an actual official posing guide that was made by a publisher. I believe One Model Place sells those. It can be a stack of photos that you cut out of a magazine. But one of the things that this helps with is when you get stuck and you don't know what to tell the model to do next, you can grab a picture and say, hey, let's try this, and show her the pose and what you would like. Then you can adjust the pose from there, but it gives you a starting place when you get stuck. Learning to talk with the model is another thing. I use that quite a bit to put the model at ease. We may be talking about the photo, or we may be, talking about her cat or her boyfriend, or, whatever it may be. But the conversation kind of helps things move along. Also, one of the big things, a lot of people are intimidated by the idea of actually working with a professional model. And in reality, there's a huge advantage of it, because they already know how they look good in poses. A lot of times they can help you with ideas and, get you over the places where you would normally get stuck. So it may cost a few dollars, but working with amateur models a lot of times there's a huge exercise in just putting them at ease. So do consider hiring a professional model. And the other thing is to practice. You go through and you do these shoots, and maybe you screw up one. Something didn't turn out the way you wanted. Turn around and try it again. As you do it, you get faster at setting up your camera. You get where it actually becomes where you'd have to think about it to screw up your composition. It becomes a reflex. All these things get easier as you go along. Then your next thing is finding models. Anybody heard of Model Mayhem? You know that site? Nobody? Okay, the URL is modelmayhem.com. It's kind of a social network / database where you can find models, see samples of their work, talk with them, and, make contacts. Same thing with One Model Place. Although Model Mayhem has kind of taken over as the larger entity, One Model Place has kind of gone downhill. But both of them give you the ability to search through model profiles and, find somebody that has the look that you want. Craigslist is another place you can go. There you can either place an ad or look through the ads that have already been posted. And then the next thing is to ask friends. You may know somebody, maybe you got a relative or, friend that you think might, look good in a photo. Questions to be prepared for, especially if you're talking with a model that you haven't met before. very typically, somebody's going to come up with what will the pictures be used for. You know, they're going to be in a magazine, they're going to be on a website, they're just going to be for the photo club. So usually they'll want to know that. Compensation is another topic. You know, a lot of the models that post ads, they're looking to supplement their income, so money is a possibility. Like I said earlier, hair and makeup, where the shoot is, when the shoot is. You also want to have some things put together with samples of work. Other people you photographed is ideal. If you don't have those yet, you know, even if you can show scenic pictures or something to prove that you know how to use your camera. A lot of times the model would be more interested in working with you if you can show good quality work. And some examples of the type of picture that you want.
Yeah, and the samples of work from a model's perspective is incredibly important, especially if you're looking somewhere that's not necessarily model centered. Like say you're posting an ad on Craigslist. As a model, I want to screen every damn ad I see on Craigslist because you never know what you're going to find. And a lot of people that post ads for models are not looking for models. So if you have some, you know, nice samples of work, that really sets you apart from, you know, the sleaze, for lack of a better word. So, you know, it really sets you up as you are, you know, a competent photographer who's looking to do a legitimate project.
Mark, can you say something about the compensation rates?
About the what?
Compensation rates, like how much, what is the going rate? How much should we be paying?
Some of it depends on how far away it is, what the work entails, and what it's going to be used for. If it's sort of for a high budget project, then the price would be higher. Most amateur projects, you're probably looking around $20 to $70 an hour, something like that. Jenny did get a fashion project that was $100 an hour.
Yeah, that was for a t-shirt company. So they were doing basically catalog for their website, but typically just for like artist portfolios, I usually do like 20 to 30 an hour, and shoots are maybe like 2 to 4 hours. So I'd say about 100 or 200 is like more than reasonable. If you're just looking for like an amateur model just to get some portfolio shots.
Okay, thank you.
Which actually, Jenny just mentioned another topic that I don't think I thought to put in here too, is the length of time in the shoot. A lot of people don't realize this, but on both sides of the camera, this can be kind of physically demanding. So if you were to plan like a 6 to 8 hour shoot, you would need a model with exceptionally fit. Most are going to be wiped out after 4 hours. That's going to be it. And I've been known to have sore muscles the day after a shoot as well, just from getting, you know, different camera angles and so on, you know, on the ground, off the ground, on top of a rock, you know, whatever it is.
And usually the model is doing some, I'd say even more athletic than the photographer, because like, you know, say, you know, I've had photographers that are like, okay, that's great, climb that tree. I'm like, I'm in 6-inch heels. This is gonna be fun. I can't imagine doing that for a full 8 hours. No.
Mark, what kind of compensation does the model get if you sell the photos? Any?
Well, it's really all up to negotiation, you know, but, you know, if you've got a $5,000 advertising picture, you know, you should think about, giving the model, a fair amount of compensation. If you're talking about just selling a photo at an art show, it's not the same kind of exposure. It's usually not the same kind of budget. So in that, you would worry about it a lot less. But it's part of what you're telling the model. One thing you're telling them what it's going to be used for. And then you're, proposing compensation. If she thinks it should be higher, she's going to tell you, well, it needs to be more. If she takes the deal, then, as long as both parties agree what it is.
So all of that is decided if you sell a photo you've taken. You pay her immediately, and then she gets compensated based on your negotiations for sales.
I think normally this sort of negotiation is done before a model will even take a shoot. So like, normally like all of this is going to be worked out in advance based on like your own projections. So say, I'm expecting, to do these photos for Vogue magazine, and they're going to sell for $1 million. So I'm offering you 20 grand to do this shoot. I'd be like, hey, I'm down for that. 20 grand sounds nice. But, like my dad said, if you're just, doing this for your portfolio, or you're going to take it to an art show to maybe sell some prints, I'd say stick with an hourly estimate. I don't think normally models don't really get like royalty payments.
It can get a bit clumsy that way. I've had a couple of models that wanted a percentage of sales, but to start with, there's a lot of pictures that don't really sell anything significant to begin with. But it also leaves you with the problem of hunting the model down to send her a check later.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they disappear, so you don't know where they went. So it's usually less clumsy just to set it all ahead of time and say, this is what you get paid for the shoot.
Mark, I have a question. When you did a shoot for the Camera Club once before, one of the things you talked about was compensating the models with photos of the shoot. Is that a standard kind of thing, or is it always that in the shoots you're talking about that money is involved as opposed to photographs?
Yeah, that's referring to trade shoots, and actually that is the next slide.
Oh, okay. Then I'll shut up.
Okay, so in posting an ad, one of the first things is to be honest. A lot of times we see people post ads that they're like hiding something. You're not sure what they're going to use it for, and some things like this. It can get very confusing, and you start getting suspicious. So you want to say ahead of time, this is what I want. And really, almost anything you want, somebody will respond to the ad. It's just a matter of, what they're getting compensated. Giving them an idea of the compensation ahead of time, may screen out people that have, too high expectations. I've had a couple of models hit me up for $150 an hour, which I have to say, I don't have the budget for that.
And unless you're like Lady Gaga or something, like, okay, yeah, sure, no, sweetie, you're not getting $150 an hour.
Yeah. Example pictures in the ads help. It proves you as a legitimate photographer. It gives an idea of the quality of your work. As Harry said, they may be interested in having copies of the pictures, so that, they'd like them to be nice. Plus, anybody getting in front of the camera, they want to know that you can make them look good. If you're wanting any kind of nudity in the shot, which is not a taboo subject, it's common. You also want to let them know ahead of time. You don't want that to be a surprise on the shoot, because that can cause miscommunications, awkward situations, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you are like planning for a nude shoot, be upfront about it. Don't drop the euphemisms, drop the obscure. Just say like, this is a topless shoot. This is a an implied nude, this is a full nude. You know, normally a legitimate model isn't going to be squeamish about it. She'll either say, yeah, that's okay, or no, I don't do that kind of work. Just, you know, be casual and upfront about it.
Yeah, and it's not the end of the world if they say no. You don't. There'll be someone else. So when Harry asked about TFP stands for Trade for Prints. There was a modification of it as we went to the digital age, was Trade for CD. Currently, that may be copying images to the model's USB drive for them to take home. Other terms you'll see is collaboration and test. And unfortunately, there's an abuse of these terms. We see it a lot in ads. We've even seen like commercial, like fashion companies advertise Trade for Prints, which is kind of improper because they're selling a product. They really should be paying for their advertising. But it can work out well in some circumstances. But the thing you got to keep in mind is this is not the code word to get a free model. The definition for a collaboration is usually it's a project that both you and the model are interested in doing. You know, she wants to contribute to the project in some manner. Usually that's after you've had a chance to sit down and talk with them and, you know, discuss it. It's usually not the way it's going to be posted in an ad. Because somebody coming in unknown, they don't know what your project is and, you know, may or may not want to work on it. Another common misuse is test shoot, which a test is supposed to be for an actual project. It's an audition for a job. So tests should not be used in the context of I want a free model. The Trade for Prints. One of the things about Trade for Prints is that you should be able to prove that you can give the model a good set of photos. Because this is a circumstance where she needs photos for her portfolio. You need a model, so you can work together to each get what you want. Misuses of this is people going, you know, well, I want to learn what I'm doing, so I don't want to pay for a model. That's not fair to the model because chances are she's going to get pictures that are a bunch of screw-ups, you know, because everybody screws up when they start out. So, you know, in the end, you want to make sure that you're giving the model something fair for her time, you know, that she's going to get good quality work. If you're not sure you can do, you know, good quality work, then pay her because she'll be happy with the money. Any other questions on that? Harry's shaking his head. So.
No, you answered mine. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so then setting up the shoot. Like I said, there's certain logistics to get into it. You know, you got to decide a time and place. And if you're outside, hopefully the weather cooperates. Food and water breaks. I usually advise the models ahead of time not to skip breakfast. Someone will do that because they want to be just that much slimmer for the shoot. The models don't look good when they're fainting. So you want to make sure they can keep going because, like I said, this is kind of physically demanding. You want to make sure that it's a safe and secure area. For some shoots, you need privacy. You don't need, you know, other people getting into the act. You got to decide on the transportation. Are they going to meet you at site? Are you going to pick them up somewhere along the way? This kind of thing. Some of that may depend on where you're going. If you're going way up into the mountains, where they may have trouble finding the sites, you might want to pick them up at a good landmark somewhere in the city. Also, a lot of times I will recommend this. A lot of models will bring somebody with them. This is for their safety, especially if they don't know you. So you should, you know, make provisions for them having somebody along with them. Even encourage it because it also protects you from anything funny going on. That way, you know, there's extra witnesses. You know, a lot of times on a shoot, I will have somebody to assist me as well, so I'm not alone with the model. Things may be done differently after you get to know each other, but initially it's good to have that extra safety of having a chaperone there.
So long as they don't interfere with the shoot.
Yeah, that is one of the things. It's usually in my instructions to the model is to bring somebody that they're comfortable with. And the rule is the chaperone's not supposed to interfere with the shoot. They shouldn't direct over your shoulder. I don't really mind if they shoot a few frames from their camera. It doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. You know, makes them self-conscious. I did have one model who brought her mother, and that created issues. You know, because mom started complaining about the top she was wearing and some things like this, which was not even an outfit I chose. It was what the model chose, and then mom's got comments in the background, so it kind of became a big distraction. I've done all right with boyfriends, husbands, friends, you know, this kind of thing. That's usually worked out, but mom was a problem. Okay, then there's learning to communicate. When you give directions, you gotta be careful about whose left or right it is. You know, you say move to the left, and it's going to be this way or that way. So you have to specify my right, your right. A lot of times it helps to give hand signals as well to make sure that the directions are clear. Also, especially if you're working with somebody who's self-conscious, they're not sure what to do, it makes it easier on them if you make the decision, you know, whether it's right or wrong. Go ahead and tell them what you would like them to do. If it doesn't work, most people are not shooting film anyways. You can just take another picture after you adjust it. The other thing I'll do that you know, helps a lot is after I get a few frames, I usually take a break and let the model see the pictures on the camera. If you are shooting film, that really can't be done, but the digital cameras help a lot because then they start getting an idea of what you're shooting, how they look in it, and it can help their self-confidence.
Mark, when you're shooting, do you tether your camera to some sort of a monitor?
I do on some shoots, yes. Sometimes I put a monitor behind me, so as soon as I shoot the frame, it'll come up on the monitor. That actually turned out to be a bit of a distraction because then the model is looking at the monitor behind me. Sometimes, especially if I've got to put the camera in an awkward place, I'll actually tether it to my tablet and shoot from the tablet. And you know, then it's a couple of things. You know, I can be sitting somewhere else besides in the middle of a problem, and I also get a larger view of the picture. Okay, like I said, shooting a few frames and showing them, you know, helps them kind of relax, especially if they start seeing, you know, hey, I do look pretty on camera. Talking with them, putting music on can help. You know, sometimes you know, dance poses work. Giving them something to do. You know, you want to hand them a prop. That could be a hat. It could be a sword. You know, you could hand them a hairbrush, something like that. But you start taking their concentration off of where their hands are. You know, then they've got something they know how to do.
That's especially the case of like inexperienced models because, you know, girls that have done this a million times, they get used to it, but almost every first time model is always, I don't know what to do with my hands, because typically girls who haven't modeled before, you know, have only posed in, you know, casual photos with their friends or family photos where, you know, normally it's just stand up, arms to the side, you know, smile, say cheese. So when you have to transition to doing something a little more artistic, it's kind of, you know, don't know what I'm doing. So, you know, just giving them something to hold, especially if it's an interactive object like a hairbrush or a weapon or whatever it is, you know, that gives ideas because it's like, okay, you know, how is this object typically used? I can do that.
As in the pictures I just put on the screen there, you know, that you got a wine glass, hat. You know, that was actually my hat. I tossed it to the model, and you know, she worked with it. The Japanese fans, or the tub in the picture. All of those things gave the model something to concentrate on, and something that they knew what they were doing with. And then, like I said earlier, posing guides. You know, there's various principles to the poses. Any kind of book, you know, like Jenny's holding the Calendar Girl book there, can be an idea for what to do. We ended up with a few pictures, you know, with some kind of book like that in the frame because she was looking through the book. And a lot of times, you know, her with the book made it an interesting photo. You do need to think about the poses, especially if you're using short lenses. It gets more critical with short lenses. Usually you're going to use a longer lens for shooting people, which puts you further away from the model. She's not as nervous about you being right up in her face, but it also helps keep from getting the wide angle lens distortion. You usually want to get the model posed parallel to your focal plane unless you have a real reason for breaking that rule. Some other things can look a little more awkward. You know, here your eye is drawn to her knees. So unless her knees are the subject of the photo, it kind of becomes a distraction. Now you can use the pose also to emphasize or de-emphasize particular parts of the body. Where I would usually put the model parallel to the focal plane. In this case, the model was kind of self-conscious about her thighs and hips. So you can see the photo where she's posed with her hips away from the camera, kind of de-emphasizes them. They're further, they appear smaller. Partially obstructing, as in the lower right picture, is another way that you can compensate for things that the model's uncomfortable with. I also ended up shooting a beauty pageant winner one time. This was Miss Liberia one year. And her specific request to me was to make her look taller. She was actually only 4'11". So the trick to that is the angle of the camera. I sat down on the ground and I put her up on a step by this fountain. This was shot out of the Natural History Museum in the Rose Garden there. And this made her look taller. She was thrilled with this picture. Using your imagination, you know, can add a lot to the photos. A lot of times, you know, doing playful things, you know, you got Jenny in the foreground there playing with the Leica camera, you know, kind of like she's doing a selfie, but there was actually no film in that camera. The model in the upper left, and she's over on the right as well, you know, she was a very playful personality. I even got a picture of her playing with her lunch. You know, we got a few pictures of her with some taquitos, posing her in the middle of the stuffed animals, blowing bubbles. Or, you know, that easy button thing, you guys probably seen these one place or another, that was sitting at my desk. And she just kind of grabbed it, picked it up, and that's where this photo came from. Doesn't hurt to try almost anything. You know, if you think it might work, you go ahead and shoot it.
And usually the more ridiculous something is, the better it will work out, because it's basically, you kind of want to just like over exaggerate and then gradually scale it back, because, like, you know, I think the shoot with the tires,
I think I have that photo a little
Yeah,
later.
it was a few slides back.
Yeah.
But I was, making these like really exaggerated expressions, and during the shoot, my dad actually told me like soften the face, tone down the expressions. But then later, when we're looking at the photos, the exaggerated ones were actually better.
Yeah, we actually do that on a lot of shoots. We don't know where the final balance is going to be because there could be very small changes in expression that will change the whole story of the photo. So a lot of times we will overdo it, we'll underdo it, and somewhere in the middle, we get the balance that we want. And there can be a lot of things in the photo that add to your story. A few years back, I got started actually doing some photos which are very complicated to set up. The photographer that gave me some of the ideas was Gregory Crutzen, if anybody's familiar with his work. I don't see any affirmatives there. He's a good photographer to look up. His photographs are quite odd, but one of the things about them is that there are small things in the photo that all add to the photo, and I started composing my own stories with that. In this one, this is a darker theme. But you see the small things, you can see here there's a bruise on her cheek, her top has been torn, there's the expression on her face, very forlorn, staring out the window. Then you start looking in the background, there's somebody sitting back here and a couple of beer cans on the floor. So this starts to compose a story that maybe you didn't get when you first glanced at the photo, but as you look through it, there's more that starts unfolding the story, things to explore, and changes how you perceive the photo as you look around it. The lighting in a photo is very important. Some of you have met Natalie before if you were at one of our previous workshops, or she's come to a couple of meetings, but she's a singer. And this photo was done for one of her songs called Raining. So in setting this up, we actually have flashes outside the window, and Thomas was outside spraying water on the window to get the rain effect. That creates this whole mood in this. There's different qualities to the light that you may not deal with when you're doing scenic photography. They become very important, especially when you're photographing a person. You might use it in, say, product photography or something like that. But there can be very dramatic differences depending on the quality of the light. The photo on the left we used to diffuse light, whereas the photo on the right is direct. And you can see the shadows are much sharper due to that. The light will also have different colors. The photo on the left is done with a normal photo strobe. The photo on the right is candlelight. As, sometimes we kind of neglect to actually pay attention to colors of light. When we're walking around, you kind of tend to think, well, it all looks white. But white is not white. White has very many different balances that can affect the mood of the photo. And you tend to see it more when it's on the camera than you do when you're just turning a light on in the room. The light direction can have a very dramatic effect. The photo on the left is from the front. The next photo is from the side. And then the one on the right, the light is in back, creating this silhouette effect. I also use a color gel on that as the reason it's red. I mentioned earlier about off-camera flashes. Anybody have their own studio lights, or are you using speed light? No responses? Okay,
I've done some.
Speed light here.
Speed light, yeah.
I've done some with lights. I just got a little setup, with some booms and some lights. I've used it a couple of times.
Uh-huh. Well, it can be worth the investment. If you're using the speed light, if you have the bounce flash, you can always bounce it off the ceiling or off a wall. Some people use the on-camera diffusers. A lot of times for me, that's not enough diffusion, you know, because it still tends to throw a shadow on the wall behind your subject. So I usually go with an off-camera flash. If you look on eBay, a lot of times there's deals. They're not real high-quality flashes, but they get the job done. You can get like these kits with a couple of studio flashes and umbrellas or soft boxes, something like that. And a lot of the photos you've seen were shot with that class of flash. I have to be a little careful about the recharge time, but other than that, I can still get the job done for not a huge investment.
And if you have a set of umbrella diffusers, they double as props.
Yeah, somewhere in here there may be some photos where I handed the model the umbrella and had them pose with it.
So you get 2 photography things for 1.
Yeah. The basics of using your off-camera flash, you know, it's not going to be totally in sync with your camera. You can use either a wireless trigger or you can actually use your speed light to trigger the flashes. Most of them are optical slaves. So you can, you know, trigger them that way. But you're usually going to set your camera up in manual because they don't talk to all of your electronics. Usually your shutter speed is going to be 1/60th or 1/25. Some of the newer cameras may be able to go 250. You're going to control a lot of your exposure with the power setting on the flash. Some of my flashes are variable power, so I can turn them up and down as needed. Because a lot of times I'm not lighting things flat. So even if I got 2 photos, one of them will be set to a lower power to give me the shadow and create more of a 3D effect rather than flattening the image. The way we used to do this with film, if everybody's still shooting film, what you need is a flash meter because you're going to have to calculate your exposure. And it's kind of a bummer if you shoot a roll of film, send it off to the lab, and you get it back and it wasn't right. Now, of course, with the digital cameras, you can shoot a frame. If it isn't right, you can adjust it until you get it right, because you can instantly see your results. And usually f11 is a good starting point. Your flash exposures, the distance between your flash and the subject is one of your variables, the power of the flash, and then the aperture. The shutter speed actually has very little effect on the exposure of the flash. The main reason for the shutter speeds that were recommended up there is that's the what they call the sync speed, and that is the speed at which the shutter is going to be fully open. With SLRs, when you get up to faster shutter speeds, it may not be fully open.っ may be a traveling slit, in which case you could end up with only a quarter of your frame exposed. The flash fire time is usually 1/5000th of a second or better. So it is possible to only expose a partial frame if you don't have the right shutter speed set.
It uses the square. Is there still
Okay, one of the things to make sure that you keep in mind is that the background is also part of your image. There was one time I had a model in front of the camera, and I kind of started walking sideways because I wanted to control what was behind her. She got a little nervous and started asking if I wanted her to move. And I kind of tried to explain to her what I was doing was arranging the background, and she looked a little puzzled and looks behind her as though it had never occurred to her that the background was part of the photo. But you want to make sure that that you keep that under control, and anything that's in the background, either it's going to be part of your story, or you may want it out of focus to make it less part of your story. The photo on the left is a white seamless paper, you know, which gets used a lot in the studio when you want nothing but the model in there. the next one next to it, that's the same model, but the kitchen became part of the story. You know, she's baking something and making quite a mess. Things like the graffiti or the beach can also be part of your photo. That's
Molly,
huh?
pretty.
Yeah, these are the examples of the pretty photos. This is usually the thing that people try to do. They try to do something pretty, but you have to keep in mind that it doesn't always have to be pretty. You could be doing something else. It could be intense. It could be odd. It could be something sad. People are actually fascinated with emotions. It doesn't matter what the emotion is, but it's something that they connect to. So you don't always have to do the glamour shots. You can go for something else that says something. You know, it may have a meaning to you, or you may want to leave a big puzzle where the person doesn't quite know what it's about and they fill in their own story. It can be a music. Here's the picture of Jenny falling in the water.
Dad of the year.
Yeah. You know, doing the unusual, people, you know, people, if you make them laugh, they like the photo. You know, again, it can be any kind of emotion. Making something odd. You may not quite know what the story is, but there's something here. You know, we have the ghost photo on the left here. We have Jenny with the tires here. This unusual globe, a lot of people ask me what that is. What it actually is a soap bubble full of fog. And that took quite a few frames to get that picture because bubbles are very uncontrollable. And you want to keep in mind etiquette when you're working. You know, that's both with the model or with other people in the space. You know, if you're shooting out in public somewhere, you know, I usually try not to get in anybody's way, you know, because they get irritated. A lot of people are curious. Sometimes they come up and ask me questions. There's one time we were actually shooting this outfit, and somebody came up and asked if they could take a picture of her, so we let them take a picture. Like I said earlier, using longer lenses. I try not to be right up in the model's face. If you're working in a group, taking turns directing, you know, so each photographer gets a turn when you're working in a group, and making sure things are safe. You know, it may look really cool to have the model standing on top of the pier or railing, but there's always the chance she's going to end up in the water, which you don't want to happen. So you want to keep an eye around, you know, make sure you're not in the way of traffic. You're not going to get hit by a bicycle. You know, make sure the mountain lion's not sneaking up on you, whatever it is.
Yeah, make sure your models don't end up in the water. I'm not bitter.
Yeah.
This happened when I was 15. I'm not bitter.
Okay, then there's also etiquette with the models. You know, typically I don't expect this from anybody in the club, but you know, sometimes photographers need to be told this, you know, because they get other ideas of what's going on. Generally, you don't want to touch the model, even if you don't think it's in an inappropriate manner. If the costume needs adjustment or something like that, you say, okay, this needs to be changed, may I? You know, she may say yes or no. She can take care of herself, but you don't want to just reach into her space. A lot of models don't like being shot when they're on a break. If they're, you know, off drinking a cup of coffee or, you know, whatever they're doing, you know, there's a time when they're on camera and there's a time when they're off camera. You want to use proper language. Generally, you don't want to start using any crude language, you know, that can make the model uncomfortable.
If you have to refer to a body part, use the body part's actual name and not, you know, slang.
Booking jobs, you know, is something the models are accustomed to. They're comfortable with it. Anybody trying to turn it into a date it's inappropriate. You have to keep things professional. Unfortunately, sending inappropriate pictures. The collection of pictures Jenny has gotten is shocking, really.
I have seen too many pictures of men. Too many.
Mark, excuse
Yeah.
me. I'm not sure, but Ray has come in and he's got his hand raised, but his mic is off, so I don't know if he's trying to communicate or not. So I just thought I'd mention that to you.
Okay, yeah, I see the hand. Ray, you want to turn your mic on?
I don't know what's going on. He's only been there a couple minutes. Why don't you go on? He's probably searching what to do.
Okay. Yeah, Ray, you turn your mic on and talk, or you can send me a chat message. I
have a lot of background noise, so I turned I muted myself.
Okay, well, you got your hand up. Did you have a question? Okay. Okay, another topic that comes up is the release. Some people will tell you that you don't need a release. I take exception with that. Because one of the reasons for the release is to make sure that you have an absolute agreement of what's going to happen with the photos. That they're not going to end up posted on a site that the model doesn't like or anything like that. They don't need to be written by a lawyer, but they need to spell out exactly what the deal was. It makes everything more clear, you know, especially if you're going to publish it, you know, where are you going to publish it? Are you going to publish it in a magazine? Is it going to be on the club website? Is it going to be on your personal website? You know, this kind of thing.
And context of publication matters. Right after I turned 18, I did a shoot for a guy that, you know, when I asked for, you know, examples of his work and where the sites were going to be posted, he gave me, you know, a very professional looking portfolio site. So I took the job. And then, you know, a few months later, I do a Google search on myself, which I do occasionally. And my photos are coming up on all these pornography sites. And I got back to him and I'm like, you know, this was not the agreement. They were for your portfolio site and nothing else. And I had to harass him for a good several months. You know, originally he thought, oh, you know, I'll just change your last name, it'll be fine. But Google was still, you know, pulling these photos up and still is from time to time. So, you know, you really need to make sure that, you know, it's protection for both parties, for the photographer and the model, to be clear on where these photos are going after they're taken.
Yeah, like I said, some people running around post things on the internet like you don't need a release, you don't need a release, for, you know, you don't need it for this, you don't need it for that. But it's a better idea just to have it all spelled out. This is what the deal is. You know, that way there's no questions on it later. And you keep the release in your file, you know, in case, you know, 10 years from now, the model comes back and said, hey, you didn't have permission to post that photo, then you have proof that you did. Okay, anybody have any questions?
I have one, Mark. I noticed that in some of your photos, you had couples in a few of them, male and female combo. Do you ever do shoots with just male models?
Yeah, one of the couple with the easy button. I did individual photos for both of them, so I do have a bunch of Ryan alone. Most of the time, I don't shoot male photos, unless I have a specific reason. But it's not that I wouldn't. It's just a matter of what I planned for the photo. Generally, and it was kind of part of the deal. That particular couple, I needed them for a project, and I got them as a couple so they'd be more comfortable with each other. And part of the deal was that I did individual shots for each of them as well to put in their portfolio.
Okay,
But,
thanks.
yeah, Ryan was actually an interesting subject. He's very expressive, and if I went through a series of his photos, you almost can't recognize him from one photo to another because of his facial expressions. He looks like a totally different person.
Yeah.
The one that I posted in this presentation, it was a black and white. He looks positively evil in that photo. He's actually a very nice guy. So
Most people that look evil in photos or film often are nice people.
yeah. But I work with male models less, but it's still not to say that I wouldn't. Sometime I actually would like to probably just do a straight male shoot to add to my portfolio.
Okay.
Okay, so one question for the group here. Part of the concept on this is to be able to set another shoot, set up another workshop, kind of help people get started. We run into two problems, though. There's a number of people talk to me offline, about, how to get started with models or some idea they may have. And when it comes down to it, the part about the nervous photographer, I think they kind of lose their nerve and don't follow through. Which, if anybody has a concept that they want to do, I'm perfectly willing to help them get the models. I learned how to do it over the years and can help people get set up. But then the other question